You watching this guy over here? Look at him sweat. That's what happens when you put a player in a tough spot, force him to make a decision for his tournament life. That's the power of lag poker, baby. Welcome back to the channel, grinders. If you're tired of being the fish at the table and ready to dish out some pain, you've come to the right place. Today we're diving deep into advanced lag poker concepts. Forget about those basic strategies. We're talking polarized ranges, overbets that'll make their heads spin, and leveling wars that'll leave your opponents questioning their own existence. This ain't for the faint of heart, but if you're ready to dominate the felt, buckle up and get ready to learn. Because in this game, knowledge is power, and I'm about to give you the keys to the kingdom. Let's get into it. Alright, let's talk polarized ranges. Imagine this. You're on the river, board is paired, and you've been betting strong the whole way. Now you're faced with a decision for your whole stack. Are you repping the nuts, or are you running a massive bluff? Here's the thing about polarized ranges. They force your opponent into the toughest spots because they have absolutely no idea what you have. See, when you play a polarized range, you're either holding the absolute nuts, the stone-cold unbeatable hand, or you're holding air, pure air, like a bluff that would make Phil Hellmuth sweat through his shirt. Think about it. If you're always betting big with only the nuts, your opponents will eventually catch on and start folding. But if you never bluff, they'll sniff you out and call you down light. That's where the beauty of a polarized range comes in. By mixing up your play, by sometimes betting big with the nuts and sometimes betting big with air, you keep your opponents guessing. You create this aura of unpredictability that makes them second guess every single action. Are you the stone-cold killer or the fearless bluffer? They won't know until it's too late. The key takeaway here is this. Polarized ranges are all about creating uncertainty and forcing your opponents into tough decisions. By mastering this concept, you'll be well on your way to becoming a lag legend. Alright, let's talk about a weapon so powerful, so brutal that it can make your opponents tremble in their boots. The overbet. Now I'm not talking about some measly 1.5 times pot bet here, I'm talking about shoving a mountain of chips across the felt. A bet so big, so intimidating that it screams, "Get out of my pot!" Overbetting is a cornerstone of lag poker, and when used correctly, it can be absolutely devastating. It's about applying maximum pressure, putting your opponent on tilt, and forcing them to make a decision for their tournament life. Now I know what you're thinking. Doug, isn't overbetting just crazy talk? Won't I lose all my chips? And you know what? You're right to be cautious. Overbetting is a high-risk, high-reward play, and it's not something you should be doing with every hand. But here's the thing. Most players are terrified of overbetting. They see it as this reckless move, a surefire way to lose their stack. And you know what that means? It means they're not prepared for it, they're not expecting it, and that's where you come in like a wolf in sheep's clothing, ready to pounce. So, when should you unleash the overbet? Well, there are a few key situations where it can be incredibly effective. First, on dry boards where your opponent is likely to have a capped range. Let's say the board is king high, no draw completed, and you've been betting strong. Your opponent calls your bets on the flop and turn, but they haven't shown a lot of strength. This is a prime spot for an overbet. By overbetting, you're putting immense pressure on them to fold, even if they have a decent hand. Alright, let's talk about leveling wars. This is where things get really interesting, where the mental game of poker truly comes into play. See, most players, they think about the hand at face value. They look at their cards, they look at the board, and they make a decision based on what they see. Then you got your slightly more advanced players. They're thinking about what their opponent has. They're trying to put them on a range of hands to figure out if they're bluffing or value betting. But the true masters of the game, the LAG legends, they're playing on a whole other level. They're not just thinking about what their opponent has, they're thinking about what their opponent thinks have. They're waging psychological warfare, planting seeds of doubt, and manipulating their opponents into making costly mistakes. This is the essence of a leveling war, and it's a skill that separates the good from the great. It's about understanding your opponent's thought process, anticipating their moves, and staying one step ahead in the mental game. Now, winning a leveling war isn't about being the most unpredictable player at the table. It's about understanding when to be predictable and when to throw in a curveball. It's about knowing when to play into your opponent's expectations and when to completely shatter them. One of the most effective ways to win a leveling war is to exploit your opponent's overthinking. See, a lot of players, especially those who are new to the concept of leveling, they tend to overthink things. They try to assign a reason to every single one of your bets, to find some hidden meaning behind every action. This is where you can really capitalize. Let's talk about bluffing, but not your run-of-the-mill, I'm feeling lucky kind of bluff. We're diving into the art of the advanced bluff, the kind that makes your opponents question their sanity and fold hands they should be stacking you with. And the key to this, my friends, is merging your range. Now, most players think of bluffing as a binary thing, you either have it or you don't. But advanced LAG players, we don't think in such black and white terms. We understand that there's a whole spectrum of bluffing opportunities and that sometimes the most effective bluffs come from blurring the lines between value bets and pure air. See, when you merge your range, you're essentially betting for value with hands that aren't traditionally considered value bets. You're throwing in those tricky hands, those good but not great hands that make your opponents scratch their heads and wonder, what in the world is he doing? Think about it. If you're only ever betting for value with the nuts, your opponents will catch on pretty quickly. They'll start folding to your bets when you're strong, and calling you down light when you're weak. But when you start mixing in those thin value bets, those hands that could go either way, you create this aura of unpredictability that makes your opponents second-guess every single action. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're on the river with a board of queen high, no flush draw completed. You're holding king-jack, which gives you top pair, but it's not exactly a hand you're thrilled to get all your chips in with. Now, a lot of players would look at this spot and think, well, I've got top pair, but it's not the nuts. Alright, LAG enthusiasts, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the mind-bending tactics of polarized ranges to the downright ruthless power of overbetting. We've delved into the psychological warfare of leveling wars and cracked the code on merging your range for maximum deception. Remember, becoming a true LAG master isn't about blindly following formulas or mimicking what you see the pros do. It's about understanding the underlying principles, adapting them to your own game, and using them to exploit your opponent's weaknesses. So, let's recap the key takeaways from today's lesson. First up, polarized ranges. These bad boys are all about creating uncertainty and forcing your opponents into impossible spots. When you've got a polarized range, they're left sweating bullets, wondering if you're sitting on the nuts or about to unleash a soul-crushing bluff. Next, we talked about overbetting, the lag equivalent of bringing out the big guns. Overbetting isn't for the faint of heart, but when used correctly, it can be absolutely devastating. Remember, overbetting is most effective on dry boards where your opponent is likely to have a capped range, or when you're running a bluff with a believable story. Then we dove into the mind games of leveling wars, where you're not just playing your cards, you're playing your opponent. It's about understanding their thought process, anticipating their moves, and staying one step ahead in the mental game. Remember, sometimes the best way to win a leveling war is to exploit your opponent's overthinking. Finally, we talked about merging your range, a concept that separates the true lag masters from the pretenders. Merging your range is all about blurring the lines between value bets and bluffs, making it virtually impossible for your opponents to put you on a hand. Remember, understanding your opponent's tendencies is key to merging your range effectively. So there you have it, the advanced LAG poker concepts that can take your game to the next level. Remember, these strategies are all about applying pressure, exploiting weaknesses, and keeping your opponents guessing. Master these, and you'll be well on your way to becoming a feared force at the poker table. But the learning doesn't stop here. In our next video, we're diving deep into hand reviews and session analysis for lag players. We'll break down real hands, analyze common leaks, and show you how to study your own play to identify areas for improvement. So make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these advanced lag concepts do you use the most in your game? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Let's keep the conversation going and help each other improve our poker skills.